The original kitchen was so small we decided to take out this wall and expand it. We're almost done remodeling now, and so I wanted to go back and show everybody where it started and how far we've come. This was the original kitchen from the late 1950s. It still has on a rotary phone, probably from the 70s, on the wall there. The cabinets, we believe they're the original cabinets. Everything seemed not to be very updated, except for like the appliances, I think, were from the late 80s. So still pretty old, but not original. So we really wanted to revamp this kitchen and give it more space. The first thing that we did was remove all of the old cabinets. And we did find somebody who wanted to use these in their garage. They were solid wood and still in pretty good condition, all things considered, just not the style for these days. So we were able to find a new home for them, and Ben took them all out and got the kitchen prepped. We have another video talking about removing the wall, but I thought I would just share a clip here because it was just so fun seeing it come down. We bought some newer cabinets from a contractor who had pulled them out of a kitchen remodel. They were still about 20 years old, but a lot more modern than what we had. And we thought with a little paint, maybe they could do the trick. That clunks very loudly instead of the modern soft close hinges. So I was able to measure to see which hinges I needed and ordered some to replace these. So once everything gets painted up, I'll be able to put the new hinges on. Removing the old hinges was pretty easy. It was just a matter of unscrewing them and popping them out. I measured the inside circle where the hinge pops in, and that's how I knew what replacement hinges to buy, like what size. This was the door for the trash pullout, and it was in the worst shape of all of the cabinet doors. Obviously, it was pretty filthy because it was for the trash, but also the brackets that held them on were screwed in on one side, which came off pretty easy, but the other one was screwed in and epoxied. So it took me some time to figure out what to do about that, but it turned out that a heat gun melted the epoxy and it popped right off after that. Then some sanding before priming took care of the wood underneath. The trash pullout is here. You can see that it has seen a lot of use and is not in the most good or cleanly condition. So, yeah, that's going to be replaced with this guy over here. So got a new one. Should slide a lot smoother, not be as beat up. Plus we didn't have the trash cans that went with that one. This one comes with the trash cans. So that should make it good as new. Following some directions for refinishing the cabinets, and the first step was to clean them with a TSP solution, but I got a TSP substitute since phosphates aren't good for the environment, so hopefully this works just as well. The directions say basically to apply it liberally to a cloth and clean it off. I think this is a degreaser, so it'll get off a lot of the grime that's built up on the cabinets over the years. So if you get a lot on the cloth there, a lot of the dirt and grime, you want to change to a clean area. make sure I get the edges too, because I'm going to be painting those. Okay, after you get it pretty clean with your TSP or your TSP substitute, then you have to get it all rinsed off with clean water. This is a primer that was recommended for cabinets. It's really good at sealing in everything and hiding wood grain, which our cabinets had a lot of wood grain, and so we wanted to make sure to cover that up so it doesn't bleed through. After that, I gave it a light sanding with, I think it was like a 300 and something grit sandpaper. I kind of did a quick and dirty job of applying the 3 different color paints that we were considering. Didn't do this like really expertly or anything, kind of just used some disposable brushes, foam brushes, just to get it on there so that we could get a look at the colors. After returning the next day and looking at the paint colors when it was dry and in the kitchen itself, we decided that we liked the medium color the best. So I went and put that on the rest of the cabinet door so that we could kind of get a better picture of what it will look like when all of our cabinets are painted. We decided to repurpose one of the cabinets for the sink, and so we had to remove the shelf from the middle, which took a little bit of muscle on my part, but I was able to snap it out of there to prepare it for the sink. Next, Ben drilled the holes for the plumbing lines to go through. We needed lines for the hot and cold water and the drain. We started to move the cabinets over to get them in the layout that we had planned, and then Ben used the level quite a lot because our floor wasn't very level, our walls weren't very plumb, and so to get the cabinets so that they were really lined up took a lot of work. Took some shims on the bottom, some extra pieces of wood to try to get things matched up, but in the end he got it so the countertops could be nice and level, which was great. It took some teamwork to get the wall cabinets up. We didn't have a lot of wall cabinets, so that was good. Otherwise, I think if you're doing it on your own, you can screw a piece of wood temporarily up there to rest the cabinet on, but I was just the holder for the cabinets for Ben, and that was perfectly fine for me. We used a stud finder ahead of time to try to decide where to put the screws, and most of the time we did hit the studs, but occasionally we didn't, and Ben had to move a little bit over from where he was initially trying and try again. Once the cabinet frames were in place, I got started by removing all of the old drawer slides and sanding everything down so that the paint could stick well. Some cabinets, if they're in really good shape, you could probably just use a deglosser instead of sanding. Since our cabinets were like 20 years old and were kind of beat up, I thought it was better just to try to sand everything down. If you do sand, I definitely recommend having an electric sander because otherwise it is just a lot of work. Before priming, I wiped everything down with a microfiber cloth and then one of the cotton tack cloths that has like a waxy, sticky substance to it to get all of that sawdust cleaned up before putting the primer on. I had to mix up the primer. One of the things with that kind of primer is that it really separates, so every time I used it, I had to mix it up again. Once the primer was dry, I had to give it a quick sanding again. Some primers might be a little bit smoother. Maybe it was how I applied mine, but it definitely needed to be sanded to get a nice smooth finish with the paint. The most time-consuming cabinets to paint were these wall cabinets that had glass doors. Since you're going to be able to see inside them, I needed to paint the insides as well. I guess we could have left them maybe that dark brown. It didn't match the insides of the other cabinets, plus it wasn't in that great of shape. So here I go, getting all the primer into all of the edges before getting to roll it on to the large surfaces. Painting inside the cabinets did build up a little bit of a layer of primer and paint inside the holes where you place the pegs to hold up the shelves. So I did need to go in after all the painting was done, and I used just the right size drill bit. I didn't put it on the electric drill. I actually just put it onto a regular manual screwdriver handle and just stuck the bit into each of the peg holes and turned it a couple times just to clear out all of that build up paint so that the pegs could just pop in and out. The best part about getting the cabinets refinished was actually putting the color on. The painting was the best part because it really changed the look of them so completely. The primer looked all streaky, and it was amazing how well the paint just went on and covered that up. I did need to put 2 coats of paint on. I lightly sanded in between coats. Sometimes I would find a drip or something after the first coat that I had to sand a little bit more aggressively, but other than that, the painting process went pretty smoothly. Here goes on the second coat. I went through the same process for the cabinet doors and drawer faces. All of the cabinet doors needed to be sanded and cleaned off, and I needed to fill some spots with wood putty, try to address any problems that I found, and then the priming went on the backs of the cabinets first and then the fronts. I created a bit of a staging area in the dining room where I could lay out all of the cabinet doors and just go one after the other with the primer. Underneath the cabinet doors, I use these little painter's tripods. They're kind of like little plastic teepees that you can put under the cabinet doors or anything that you're painting to lift them off of the surface. I discovered that the end of the foam roller was really good at getting into the crevices of the cabinets, especially the decorative fronts. So I could use those instead of a separate foam brush to get the primer and the paint in there. This shellac-based primer did give off a lot of fumes. You need good ventilation. If you can do it outside or maybe in an open garage, that would be great. I had a fan going and windows open, and anything I could do to try to get some fresh air in there. When I did try painting outside, sometimes insects or things would fly into the paint and get stuck there. So sometimes those things could just sand right off. Definitely, it was easier for the primer to do that than with the finished paint. I had to roll in many directions to try to get the primer into the grains of the wood and just get everything coated really well. This primer also dries pretty quickly, so it's important to keep moving and watch out for any drips before they solidify. After sanding the primer and getting all the dust cleaned off, I started with the first coat of paint. I should have started with the backs of the cabinet doors, but I forgot that at first, so I did the front of one and then I remembered to flip them over for the rest. Here I'm putting on the second coat of paint. This Sherwin-Williams Emerald Urethane paint dries with a nice smooth finish. Also, you don't need to do a top clear coat. Once the paint was dry, I could start working on the soft close hinges. The hinges came with these plastic anchors attached, but my cabinet doors already had those plastic anchors installed and they weren't budging to replace them with these other ones. So I just unscrewed those plastic anchors off of all of the hinges and installed them right into the existing anchors. I was able to use the existing screw holes in the face frames to put the doors back in. One of the nice things about these hinges is that they are adjustable. They have 3 screws in the back that allow you to adjust the hinge in and out, up and down, and I guess back and forth. Getting the door back onto the Lazy Susan took some finagling, but I did eventually get it attached. Having the doors reinstalled, I noticed like light from the different angles could show me any spots that I needed to touch up with the paint. Next, I worked on installing the new trash pullout. The directions weren't super clear, so I have to say that I had to fiddle with this quite a bit before I got it completely installed. It came in two parts where you would buy the pullout and then you would need to buy a separate piece to actually mount the door to it. Painting the frames for the glass doors was challenging. It was difficult to get all those different pieces sanded and primed and not have drips, so I had to do each layer very carefully. All the drawers in our cabinets had these old types of drawer slides that uses a plastic wheel and they don't slow close, so we decided to replace them with newer drawer slides that are a bit more modern. These ones use ball bearings to slide in and out, which is a lot smoother, and they have a soft close mechanism. Since we have cabinets with face frames, you can't mount the drawer slide directly to the wall of the cabinet. It has to be mounted out some to the face frame, and then it needs support in the back to hold it. The old slides use these plastic brackets on the back, which the new ones, we have a different kind of bracket and it's metal, so we have to get the old ones off and they just pry right out. I have screw holes left from the old rails, which I can reuse in the front of the cabinet. In the back, I have to drill a new hole for the brackets back there. These have a little plastic lever on the back that lets you release the part that connects to the drawer from the rest of the slide. So then I use the mounting hole that's all the way in the front that you have to expose by putting it through one of these holes to see it. Using a level, I was able to figure out where the back brackets were going to have to line up for the rails to be level. So I had an idea that they needed to just be installed right near where there was one of the existing holes from the old bracket. So the old brackets actually had two holes, and it was the top hole that lined up to where I needed to screw in my new metal brackets. So I could just kind of eyeball it and put a hole in for the screw there. Then I made sure that I used the slot on the back of the bracket that allowed movement of the bracket from left to right. So that gave me some flexibility to be able to get the bracket to line up properly. I made sure to keep the screws in the back of the bracket a little bit loose so that they could flex and slide around as I put the drawers in so that they could line up properly. Our old drawers had knobs on all of them, and we decided to go with a handle instead, which meant I needed to put some wood putty over the existing holes before I painted them so that we could be ready to switch out for a handle instead. But that also meant drilling new holes for the handles. We bought a jig to help us determine where to drill the holes for the handles. Ben got it all set up for the right distance, and I just needed to measure for the center of the drawer to know where to line up the jig. Now that I have my middle line lined up to the little triangle that's there, I can take this punch and mark where we have to drill the holes. I just want everyone to know that Ben's in the background doing a ton of work on this project. Usually I'm the one who remembers to video, so you'll see me a lot more, but Ben actually installed almost all of the handles. I think this was the only one I actually installed myself. To install the rails, you're going to want to put the flat part against the face of the drawer front. I marked my tape measure for how deep I need to install it, since all my drawers were the same. You have different holes you can use to mount them. I've been using the slots that go up and down because that gives me the flexibility of changing that if I don't have it exactly right. I'm trying to just do the hole like right in the middle so I have room to move either direction. It's actually hard using this to get it lined up in the middle of the hole, so I usually use the manual screwdriver to finish it. This way I can move it to the middle and then tighten it up. I should mention about trying to order the right size of the drawer slides. You can see that these slides are a bit long for these drawers, but they needed to be that long so that they could reach the back of the cabinet to connect to the back braces. So when I measured my cabinet, it was about 23.5 inches from the back to the front of the face. And so you have to order the next size down of slides, obviously, so they don't stick out. So I had to get 22-inch slides. And then you have some wiggle room with the back brackets that where the slide fits into the bracket, it could go deeper or shallower. So we were able to make up the difference in space with that. We also did have some longer drawers that were pull-outs that these fit better on. Not in quite right on the right side, which is why it's not going all the way back. All right, so once I got it snapped in properly on both sides, it slides in and closes properly. The only thing I still have to do though is tighten up the screws in the back where the back braces are. Once you push the drawer in, the rails will automatically line up to where they need to be. So you can just tighten up your screws in the back. So that they don't shift around anymore. If you get those tightened up, just make sure you test your drawer again to make sure everything's good. These are the longer drawers or pullouts that we had that I already installed the new slides on. One thing I had to do with these was that I needed to install the rails on the drawer sticking out a ½ inch in the front so that the drawer would sit back a ½ inch when it goes into the cabinet, because this door has this added piece in between that needs to sit back, and when I accidentally installed these flush like I was doing with these drawers, what happened was this would end up sticking out like that. So after I moved the rails back so that the drawers could sit back further in the cabinet, we had no problem. And as you can see, these have the soft close hinges on them that we swapped out. Those were a straightforward swap out from the original hinges. They just popped right into the same place. Installing the next drawer, I needed to use some of that wiggle room that I had in the slots on the rails because the drawer didn't quite line up right, and there was like a bigger gap on one side than the other. So I did adjust it, but it turns out I still needed to physically move one of the rails. But after that, I got it lined up. Then the bottom drawer, I kind of dry fitted in there just so I wouldn't have that same problem. And I noticed that I was going to have to install the rails lower, like I did on that one side of the drawer above it. So I measured out a smaller gap to install the rails on that bottom drawer. The drawer was still a little bit at an angle, but I was able to just loosen up the screw and the side rail and slide it a little bit in the slot. So the cabinets are finally painted and all installed, and I think all we have left to do is to install the microwave and the backsplash.